Relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this upcoming weekend. Unbeaten Ellie Scotney will be returning to action against seasoned veteran of Spain, very dangerous, very capable, Mary Romero. We've talked about this fight.
Mary Romero, she's no joke. She beat unbeaten Amy Timlin. More recently, she beat unbeaten Maria Secchi.
Is Mary Romero set to beat yet another unbeaten fighter in Ellie Scotney?
This weekend, we'll find out. This fight, it was rescheduled after the collapse of the Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight.
Initially, it was supposed to go down on the undercard of that show. We all know what happened. Mary Romero, she sports a professional record of 8 wins, 2 losses with no draws.
2 knockouts.
To Ellie Scotney's unblemished record of 5 wins, no losses, no draws, no recorded knockouts, not yet. Ellie Scotney's a very spry 24 years old to Mary Romero, who's 37.
Mary Romero is 13 years older than Ellie Scotney, but she is dangerous.
Both fighters are orthodox fighters, leading with their left hand, their jab hand, and this fight is for the EBU title, Mary Romero's EBU title, the reigning EBU champion.
And I've said it before, I'll say it here and now, I'll say it again, I like Ellie's chances,
Not all unbeaten up-and-comers, not all unbeaten fighters, not all unbeaten prospects are created equal. I believe that Ellie Scotney is a cut above the rest, a cut above the girls that Mary Romero has been fighting so far. I think that Ellie is more well-rounded than Amy Timlin was when Mary Romero fought her. I believe that Ellie Scotney is an overall better boxer than Maria Secchi
when Mary Romero fought her.
And I believe that Ellie Scotney is well-balanced enough and capable enough to assert herself when necessary and lay off when necessary. Mary Romero is a characteristic mid-range to inside pressure fighter, volume puncher. That's her calling card. Aggression.
And when you're dealing with a fighter like this, it's a bit of a balancing act.
You don't want to be too defensively minded with a fighter as aggressive as a Mary Romero. You don't want to lay off too much, because if you do, in the eyes of the judges, it's going to look like you're getting outworked. You don't want to be too defensive, but you don't want to be too aggressive either. You don't want to engage too much, because if you do, you're giving Mary exactly what she wants.
You're just making her job that much easier.
So as stated, it's a bit of a balancing act, dealing with a fighter like this, alternating from offense to defense and doing so seamlessly.
And I believe Ellie Scotney is that fighter. I believe she possesses the necessary ingredients, the necessary tools to successfully execute this.
Secure the W against Mary Romero. Mary Romero that saw action only once in the year of 2020, only once last year, only once in September of last year, and she's already seen action at least once this year, back in May, the Maria Secchi fight we talked about.
Now she's fighting Ellie Scotney, and as stated, I feel like Ellie Scotney is a more maturated fighter than Amy Timlin was, and a more versatile fighter, more nuanced boxer than Maria Secchi.
Believe that young Ellie Scotney
Catford
has had all the necessary experience fights that would prepare her for this one. Lest we forget, she shared the ring with a former champion of Argentina in Helenius Guanini.
Mid-range to inside aggressive pressure fighter, the same way that Mary Romero's a mid-range to inside aggressive pressure fighter.
She faced the former champion in Helenius Guanini in February of this year, returned to action in May against yet another former champion in Maria Cecilia Roman, won a dominant victory, looked the part.
I am confident that Ellie Scotney can win a points decision against Mary Romero this weekend on the undercard of Taylor versus Carbajal.
I'm confident because Ellie Scotney's not in unfamiliar territory opposite the ring, a mid-range to inside aggressive pressure fighter. She's seen that base style before.
I will say that Ellie's not big on power. She's more of a finesse fighting kind of fighter. That's what she is.
Ellie's not big on power, and she's not a knockout merchant. And Mary Romero, having never even been knocked out, I don't expect this fight to end in a knockout.
No, it'll go to the cards.
What I'm expecting to see is that Ellie Scotney, round after round, will show the neater, tidier work, as opposed to the very scrappy, very messy Mary Romero, whose punches are a lot wider than Ellie Scotney's, easy to counter.
If you're fast enough.
Sharp enough. I think Ellie Scotney is all those things and more. I think Ellie Scotney, comparatively, she's got the better feet of the two fighters in the fight. She is the more coordinated boxer. What normally normally works for Mary Romero is she's got some punching power and she's willing to get one to give one. She's willing to trade. And that normally flusters a lot of boxers that don't have the coordination and mobility and speed of an Ellie Scotney. But Ellie's got these things working for her, so I think she'll be able to manage the distance.
Inside and outside of the pocket, I think Ellie will be the better boxer.
I think Ellie will connect with shorter, more defensible punches than Mary Romero. I think we're going to see a lot of countering opportunities she exploits as well as managing the distance and navigating it safely while showing the cleaner work.
Don't get me wrong, Mary Romero's no pushover, but when I think about this fight in my mind's eye,
I feel like Ellie Scotney's got everything she needs to win this thing, that she has everything she needs to succeed where some other unbeaten fighters might have failed. Ellie won't.
Ellie Scotney by way of a points decision. Ellie Scotney on points is the pick.
I think this weekend she will become EBU champion. In men's heavyweight news, Frank Warren was once again talking about Anthony Joshua for some reason, saying he being Anthony Joshua, is liable to get knocked over by anybody. I'd put any of my guys in with him. Joyce would knock him out, and Dubois would do the same.
Based on how these guys talk about Anthony Joshua, you'd think he'd been knocked out 3 or 4 times.
You really would, when in all actuality, he's only ever suffered 1 knockout loss. 1, just 1, not 2 like Deontay Wilder.
Even stranger is that he actually fought the man that knocked him out. He fought Andy Ruiz Jr. for a second time, beat him in lopsided fashion, won a lopsided decision. He was never dropped in that fight, obviously wasn't stopped in that fight.
But in the minds of a few, it's like that second fight, it's like that rematch, it's like it never happened, it's like it doesn't even count.
Even here today in 2022, after Andy Ruiz is coming off a decision win over Luis Ortiz, who he dropped 2 times.
I mean, Andy Ruiz, he's no pushover. This guy's a decent boxer, good hand speed mid-range to inside, and mid-range to inside, this guy can punch. This guy has enough pop. He can take you out.
Objectivity in the sport of boxing.
I hardly expect Frank Warren to exhibit any kind of objectivity when it comes to his fighters versus someone else's. I mean, a promoter promoting his guy.
Listen, it wouldn't be so bad if it actually resulted in a fight. In a fight between Anthony Joshua and any one of these guys. Joyce, Daniel Dubois.
But if I myself find Frank Warren's constant candor about Anthony Joshua and what this guy would do to him, and what that guy would do to him, if I find it annoying, it's because I know underneath it all, regardless of what Frank Warren is saying, he wouldn't do what he needs to do to make those fights a reality, because here's reality. Daniel Dubois is not a bigger box office draw than Anthony Joshua, and neither is Joyce. In spite of Joyce's unbeaten record and his WBO interim status, and in spite of Daniel Dubois' WBA regular title, at the box office and at the gate, neither one of these 2 guys have been promoted to the point to where they're bigger draws than that guy. So in order to make a fight with that guy, you know what you have to do.
I know a lot of you guys out there might be getting tired of hearing me say this, but this is the reality of things. If you want to make a fight with this guy, you're the B-side.
So many conversations in the sport of boxing seem to carry on devoid of logic, devoid of common sense. But common sense dictates that if Anthony Joshua, as a boxer, in victory or defeat, if he generates more revenue than these guys, that means in order to get him in the ring, you need to understand that. You need to understand that your unbeaten record and your WBO interim title, that doesn't make you a bigger draw than that guy. So if you want to fight with that guy, you've got to acquiesce to being the B-side. And I don't think for a second that Frank Warren is going to send Daniel Dubois or Joyce across the street to the DAZN platform. So if he's not going to do that, what is he doing?
Remember that we're talking about a fighter who's coming off of 2 consecutive losses. And remember that for some reason, Frank Warren is still talking about him. He's still mentioning that guy. Why?
Don't forget that Frank Warren promotes Tyson Fury, the WBC champion of the world, but you don't hear Frank talking about a fight between Fury and Joyce or Fury and Dubois. These in-house fighters, these in-house heavyweights he promotes. For some reason, he's still talking about Eddie Hearn's fighter that has no belt for these guys to win. So why would he be doing that?
The Tyson Fury, those are 2 in-house fights that you can make without having to deal with Eddie Hearn or anybody else.
I mean, consider that Frank Warren doesn't carry on talking about what Joyce would do to Luis Ortiz or a Gerald Washington. He doesn't carry on about Joyce or Daniel Dubois doing something to anybody else. He's still bringing up Anthony Joshua, and you have to ask yourself why.
Forget about the fandom. Objectively, as a consumer, if you'd be interested in seeing Anthony Joshua box Joe Joyce, if you'd be interested in seeing Anthony Joshua box Daniel Dubois, how do you make it happen? How does it come about?
And at least for me, as a consumer, this is where it gets annoying because Frank Warren knows how this works just as much as I or you. Maybe those guys do beat Anthony Joshua. Maybe they don't. In order to find out, you've got to be willing to make sacrifices because your fighters don't generate the same revenue that he does. If you want to make a fight between your guys and that guy, they've got to cross the street, not him, because he doesn't need your fighters.
He doesn't need your fighters to make money. He makes more money than your fighters losing fights, let alone winning them.
I don't actually think Daniel Dubois beats Anthony Joshua. I'd pick Anthony Joshua to knock him out comfortably. Lest we forget, Daniel Dubois suffered his first loss at the hands of Joe Joyce because he doesn't move his head. He doesn't slip the jab.
Anthony Joshua knocks that guy out. The more interesting fight is the Joe Joyce fight. The problem is, Joe is now more popular than he ever was before. On the heels of knocking out Joseph Parker,
He's got a profile boost, but it's not so big a boost that he rivals Anthony Joshua in terms of marquee value. Money that he generates at the gate and money that he generates at the box office. He's nowhere near the kind of money that Anthony Joshua generates. So if you really do want to make a fight between Joe and Anthony, you've got to send him across the street, buddy.
we all know you're not about to do that, so what the hell are you doing?
Are you so incapable of turning Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce into box office draws, box office stars? Are you so incapable of doing this that you're still resorting to shading Anthony Joshua?
It's the same old shit. Frank Warren, Tyson Fury, they can't shut the fuck up about this guy, and I know why.
I know why. You don't sit around taking shots at guys like Luis Ortiz. You don't sit around taking shots at guys like Gerald Washington. You're not taking shots at guys like Ali Demirezin. You're taking shots at Anthony Joshua because you know he's got an audience and he's worth some money.
Bigger audience than your boys and more money than your fighters.
If this really were about making a fight between Anthony and these fighters, I wouldn't mind it so much, but I know that it's not. You're not going to do what you need to do to make those fights a reality, and what you are doing is shamelessly trying to ride someone's wave, someone who's coming off of back-to-back losses because you're unable to turn these guys into box office draws, box office stars. But if you're not going to do what you need to do to make those fights a reality, why don't you shut the fuck up already?
Why is Frank Warren carrying on about Joshua versus Joyce or Joshua versus Dubois when Tyson Fury's sitting right there?
Those are all in-house fights. Those are all your fighters. You know what Tyson Fury said? He said he doesn't think he'll ever fight Anthony Joshua because they're too hard to negotiate with. The Joshua people. Well, you wouldn't have to negotiate with those people if you're fighting Joe Joyce. That's an in-house fight. You wouldn't have to negotiate with those people if you're fighting Daniel Dubois. That's another in-house fight. And you don't see Frank talking about that.
You say it's because Fury's supposed to be fighting Usyk next year.
Well, is he going to retire after that? Because if he's not, and he wins that Usyk fight, those are fights you can make in-house.
So make it happen.
Because these stupid games you're playing aren't going to get you nowhere. How long have you been promoting those two guys?
No substitute for an actual fight, you know. And if it's a fight you're looking for, if a fight with Anthony is what you want to make, you know what you have to do.
Acquiesce to being the B-side and cross the street, because you won't make the money with anyone else that you can make with Anthony.
You won't. Look at where Deontay Wilder's stupid games got him.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Dan Raphael very recently published a story detailing Deontay Wilder's box office numbers. Box office numbers that seem to fall in line with Rick Glacier's numbers from a little over a week ago and Michael Wood's numbers. Michael Wood stated that the pay-per-view brought in around 50,000 pay-per-view buys. Rick Glacier's number was a little better than that. Rick said it brought in about 77,000. According to Dan Raphael,
Via his sources, it brought in about 75,000 pay-per-view buys for an estimated dollar amount of $5.6 million at a price point of $74.99.
$5.6 million at the box office. That's what that generated. And depending on what the operational costs were and the guaranteed purses to the fighters, particular to this conversation, Wilder's guaranteed purse, depending on what they had to put up in order to make that fight happen, this could either be a monumental flop or a monumental fall from grace for Deontay Wilder, because $5.6 million at the box office.
It's a far cry from the $30 million guaranteed he made with Tyson Fury.
It's even more of a far cry than the $100 million he was guaranteed to take on Anthony Joshua, the $100 million offer that he rejected.
At a suggested retail price of $74.99, the pay-per-view generated more than $5.6 million in domestic television revenue, although much of that money goes to the platforms that carried the event. That's right. In case you're not aware, Wilder don't get to take all of that home.
And at the gate, I'd estimate they generated anywhere between $3 and $5 million, somewhere in between there.
Deontay Wilder, like these aforementioned fighters, he played the same game when it came to Anthony Joshua that they're currently playing. He simply didn't want to acquiesce to being the B-side fighter and crossing the street in order to make the fight. He didn't want to do that.
He didn't want to do it. No matter how many offers he received from Matchroom, nothing was ever enough, only for him to inexorably lose his WBC title to Tyson Fury and subsequently admit that he would have made more money fighting Anthony than what he made fighting Tyson Fury.
The silver lining and the saving grace is that Eddie Hearn still thinks Wilder versus Joshua is a big money fight, a big commercial fight, perhaps the biggest fight in boxing.
And it is a big money fight. It is a commercially viable fight, so long as the Wilder people are willing to play ball. Play ball on the right terms to make this fight a reality, and I don't think they're going to do it.
Maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe for whatever reason, he simply cannot concede to being the B-side to Anthony Joshua.
His pride won't let him. In tandem with the bureaucratic red tape and the politics of boxing, it's a difficult fight to make because I don't think for a second Deontay's going to cross over to the DAZN side of things and make this thing a reality. And your best bet to make this thing a reality is him crossing that street. Because Anthony Joshua fights exclusively on DAZN.
Per the deal that he reached ahead of the Usyk rematch, the deal that went into effect after the Usyk rematch.
In case you guys forgot, the deal that he reached indicates that moving forward, he'll box exclusively on the DAZN platform.
Deontay Wilder's last 3 or 4 fights have been staged as Fox pay-per-views.
The Luis Ortiz rematch, the Tyson Fury rematch, the Tyson Fury trilogy, and his most recent fight with Robert Helenius. Those were billed as PBC on Fox pay-per-views. But with Fox potentially leaving the sport of boxing after this year, where's Wilder gonna go? If you want that Joshua fight, you know what you've got to do. Unless what you're gonna do is float right back over to Showtime and stay over there.
You ain't got no leverage in that situation with Anthony Joshua. Let's make that crystal clear. You just sold 77,000 pay-per-view buys domestically.
Not even half of what you sold with Tyson Fury. So if you do want a Joshua fight, you need to play ball.
Otherwise, you can stay over there and keep flopping.